King Charles II of England ruled at the height of Restoration England, but what of his many children who never sat on the throne? Today we trace each of his offspring, from the bold Duke of Monmouth to those who died in early childhood, and see how their lives unfolded. The titles they earned, the families they built, the rebellions they led, and how they lived or died in the shadow of their royal father. Over the next 45 minutes, we'll step through the full roster of his children, legitimate, illegitimate, and sometimes disputed, mapping birth to death, marriage to career, and legacy to posterity. Charles II, known as the Merry Monarch, fathered at least 14 acknowledged children by 7 different mistresses, yet died without a single legitimate heir. Why did some flourish and found ducal lines while others died young or faded from history? How did royal blood translate into noble titles, military commands, and lasting dynasties? Let's discover whatever happened to Charles II's children. Born on 9 April 1649 in Rotterdam, James Scott entered the world as the eldest son of the future King Charles II and Lucy Walter, a Welsh gentlewoman. His birth occurred during his father's exile following the execution of Charles I, when the young prince was barely 19 years old. Lucy Walter had become Charles's mistress in The Hague, and their son's birth represented the first of many illegitimate children who would populate the future king's household. The child was initially known simply as James Crofts, taking his surname from his guardian rather than any royal designation. James spent his early years in continental exile, moving between various courts as his father navigated the treacherous politics of restoration. At age 4, he was removed from his mother's care and placed under the guardianship of William Crofts, Baron Crofts, hence acquiring the surname he would bear into adolescence. His education was carefully managed to befit a royal bastard of obvious importance to his father. By 1662, 3 years after the Restoration, the 13-year-old James was brought to the English court where he was openly acknowledged by the king. Charles II granted him the surname Scott and created him Duke of Monmouth and Earl of Doncaster, making his royal paternity unmistakably clear. Monmouth's adult life was defined by military distinction and, ultimately, catastrophic political ambition. He received extensive military training and proved himself an able commander, serving with distinction in the Anglo-Dutch Wars and leading successful campaigns against Scottish Covenanters. His victory at the Battle of Bothwell Bridge in 1679 demonstrated real tactical ability and enhanced his reputation at court. However, his Protestant faith and charismatic personality made him a focal point for those who opposed the succession of his Catholic uncle, James, Duke of York. Following Charles II's death in 1685, Monmouth launched his infamous rebellion, landing in Dorset with a small force and proclaiming himself the rightful king. The rebellion collapsed at the Battle of Sedgemoor, and Monmouth was captured, brought to London, and executed on 15 July 1685. In 1663, Monmouth married Anne Scott, 4th Countess of Buccleuch, a union that brought him vast Scottish estates and the additional title of Duke of Buccleuch. The marriage produced several children, including James Scott, who inherited his father's Scottish titles after the forfeiture of his English ones. Through his wife's lineage, Monmouth gained substantial wealth and territorial influence in the Scottish borders, making him one of the most powerful noblemen in Britain. His children would continue the Scott line, though under the shadow of their father's treason and execution. Charles II's relationship with his eldest son was complex and ultimately tragic. The king clearly favored Monmouth above his other illegitimate children, granting him the highest titles and most prominent military commands. Yet Charles consistently refused to legitimize him or alter the succession, despite intense pressure from Protestant politicians. The king's affection for his son made the eventual confrontation all the more painful, and Charles reportedly wept when he signed Monmouth's death warrant. Today, the Duke of Buccleuch line continues through Monmouth's descendants, though his English titles were forever forfeited. His rebellion remains a cautionary tale of ambition overreaching royal favor. Charlotte Jemima Henrietta Maria Fitzroy was born around 1650, the daughter of Charles II and Elizabeth Killigrew, later Viscountess Shannon. Her birth occurred during the early years of Charles's exile, when his father was establishing relationships with various women in the royalist circles of continental Europe. Elizabeth Killigrew was herself from a prominent Cornish family with strong royalist credentials, making her an appropriate companion for the exiled prince. The child was given the Fitzroy surname, a traditional designation for royal bastards meaning son of the king, though in this case adapted for a daughter. Charlotte spent her early childhood in the uncertain world of the exiled court, where royal children, legitimate and otherwise, were raised with careful attention to their eventual utility in the restoration of the monarchy. Following the Restoration in 1660, she was brought to the English court where she received an education befitting her royal parentage. Charles II acknowledged her as his daughter and ensured she received suitable preparation for marriage into the nobility. Her upbringing emphasized the skills expected of aristocratic women: languages, music, needlework, and the social graces necessary for court life. Charlotte's adult life centered on her role as the acknowledged royal daughter with access to court privileges and a suitable marriage arranged by her father. She moved within the highest circles of Restoration society, participating in the elaborate court ceremonies and entertainments that characterized Charles II's reign. Her royal blood ensured her a position of respect among the nobility, though as an illegitimate daughter, her prospects were naturally more limited than those of her brothers. She received grants and allowances from her father that provided financial security throughout her life. Charlotte married twice, both unions reflecting her status as a royal daughter. Her first marriage was to James Howard, bringing her into one of England's most prominent noble families. Following his death, she married William Paston, 2nd Earl of Yarmouth, which provided her with the title by which she is best remembered. Through these marriages, she had several children who carried forward her bloodline into the English aristocracy. Her descendants would continue to hold positions of prominence in English society, though without the ducal titles granted to some of her half-brothers. Charles II maintained a warm relationship with Charlotte throughout his life, treating her with the affection and attention appropriate to an acknowledged daughter. Unlike some of his children whose mothers fell from royal favor, Charlotte's position remained secure due to her mother's continued respectability and her own successful integration into court society. Her legacy lives on through her descendants in the Paston and Howard families, representing one of the more stable and enduring lineages among Charles II's children. The Countess of Yarmouth died in 1684, just 1 year before her father, having lived to see the full flowering of Restoration society. Charles FitzCharles was born in 1657, the son of Charles II and Catherine Pegg, later known as Lady Green. His birth came during the final years before the Restoration, when his father was still navigating the complex politics of exile while building the relationships that would eventually secure his return to the throne. Catherine Pegg was a gentlewoman of respectable family, and her son would be one of the few among Charles II's children to be granted an earldom while pursuing a military career. The FitzCharles surname clearly indicated his royal paternity while distinguishing him from the Fitzroy children born to other mistresses. Charles FitzCharles spent his early years in preparation for a life of service to the crown, with particular emphasis on military training. Following the Restoration, he was acknowledged by his father and received the education appropriate to a royal son destined for military command. His upbringing emphasized martial skills, strategy, and the leadership qualities expected of someone who would represent royal authority in challenging military postings. By his late teens, he had developed the physical prowess and tactical understanding that would characterize his brief but distinguished military career. Charles II created his son, Earl of Plymouth, in 1675, and shortly thereafter appointed him to serve in the strategically crucial but notoriously difficult posting of Tangier. The North African port city was part of Catherine of Braganza's dowry, but its defense required constant vigilance against Moorish attacks and diplomatic skill in managing local alliances. Charles FitzCharles proved himself an able military commander, demonstrating both courage in combat and wisdom in managing the complex political situation of the garrison. His service in Tangier enhanced his reputation as a capable soldier and administrator, suggesting a promising future in royal service. Unfortunately, the challenging conditions of North African service proved fatal to the young earl. In 1680, at the age of 23, Charles FitzCharles died in Tangier, likely from disease rather than enemy action. His death represented a significant loss to his father, who had invested considerable hopes in his son's military potential. The Earl of Plymouth's death demonstrated the very real dangers faced by those who served the crown in its most challenging outposts. Charles FitzCharles never married nor had children, his early death cutting short any opportunity to found a lasting dynasty. His relationship with Charles II was characterized by royal favor and trust, as evidenced by his elevation to the earldom and his appointment to the crucial Tangier command. The king clearly saw potential in this son and invested in his military education and career advancement. Charles FitzCharles represented one of the more promising of the king's sons, combining royal acknowledgement with genuine ability and dedication to crown service. Though the earldom of Plymouth died with Charles FitzCharles, his brief career exemplified the opportunities and dangers faced by Charles II's acknowledged sons. His service in Tangier demonstrated the king's confidence in his illegitimate children's ability to serve the realm effectively in positions of real responsibility. The Earl of Plymouth's early death remains a reminder of the harsh realities of 17th century military service and the particular challenges faced by those who served the crown in its most distant and dangerous postings. Catherine FitzCharles was born around 1658, reputedly the daughter of Charles II and Catherine Pegg, making her the sister of Charles FitzCharles, Earl of Plymouth. However, her life story remains shrouded in uncertainty, with historical records providing conflicting accounts of her fate. Some sources suggest she was acknowledged as the king's daughter, while others question her paternity altogether. Her birth would have occurred during the same period as her supposed brothers, when Charles II was establishing relationships that would continue after the Restoration. The details of Catherine FitzCharles's upbringing remain frustratingly sparse, with different historical accounts offering contradictory narratives about her early years. Some records suggest she was raised in a religious environment, possibly indicating preparation for a monastic life, while others imply she died in infancy or early childhood. The uncertainty surrounding her fate reflects the sometimes haphazard record-keeping regarding illegitimate royal children, particularly daughters who were less likely to receive formal titles or public acknowledgement. Historical sources diverge significantly on Catherine's ultimate fate. Some accounts suggest she entered a convent, following a path not uncommon for illegitimate royal daughters who required respectable but withdrawn lives. This explanation would account for her virtual disappearance from court records after early childhood. Other sources indicate she may have died young, which would explain the lack of detailed records about her adult life. A third possibility suggested by some historians is that questions about her paternity led to her being quietly removed from royal acknowledgement. If Catherine FitzCharles was indeed the daughter of Charles II, her relationship with her father remains largely undocumented. Unlike her supposed brother Charles, who received an earldom and military command, Catherine left no clear evidence of royal favor or formal acknowledgement. This absence could indicate either early death, religious vocation, or disputed paternity. The lack of records regarding her marriages or children suggests she either died young or lived a retired life that left few traces in historical documents. Catherine FitzCharles represents one of the more mysterious figures among Charles II's reputed children. Her uncertain fate illustrates the challenges historians face in documenting the lives of illegitimate royal daughters, who often received less attention in contemporary records than their brothers. Whether she died young, entered religious life, or lived quietly outside court circles, her story demonstrates that not all of the king's children achieved the prominence or lasting legacy of their more famous siblings. The uncertainty surrounding her life serves as a reminder that even royal parentage could not guarantee historical remembrance. Anne Fitzroy was born in 1661, the daughter of Charles II and Barbara Palmer, Countess of Castlemaine, one of the king's most influential and long-lasting mistresses. Her birth occurred early in the reign, when her mother was at the height of her power and beauty, dominating court life and royal favor. As one of several children born to Barbara Palmer, Anne represented the offspring of perhaps the most significant extramarital relationship of Charles II's reign. The Fitzroy surname clearly proclaimed her royal heritage, while her mother's prominent position ensured she would receive appropriate recognition and provision. Anne Fitzroy grew up in the luxury and privilege of the Restoration Court, where her mother's influence ensured excellent education and preparation for aristocratic life. Barbara Palmer was notorious for her extravagance and ambition, qualities that extended to her children's upbringing. Anne received instruction in languages, music, dancing, and all the accomplishments expected of a woman of her rank. Her childhood was spent between her mother's various residences and the royal court, where she had regular contact with her father and half-siblings. Charles II showed consistent favor to Barbara Palmer's children, ensuring they received titles and advantageous marriages. Anne's adult life was characterized by her marriage into one of England's most prominent noble families, and her establishment as a respected figure in aristocratic society. Her royal parentage opened doors throughout the highest levels of English society, and she moved comfortably among the great families of the realm. She received grants and allowances from her father that maintained her in appropriate style, and her position as an acknowledged royal daughter ensured her continued prominence even after her mother's influence at court declined. In 1674, Anne Fitzroy married Thomas Leonard, 15th Baron Dacre, later created Earl of Sussex, a union that brought her the title by which she is best remembered. The marriage was clearly advantageous to both parties, combining her royal blood with his ancient lineage and substantial estates. The couple had several children, ensuring the continuation of both the Dacre and Leonard bloodlines, enhanced by royal descent. Through her marriage, Anne became connected to one of England's oldest noble families, with roots stretching back to the Norman conquest. Charles II maintained a warm and supportive relationship with Anne throughout his life, treating her with the consistent favor he showed to all of Barbara Palmer's children. Her mother's prolonged influence at court ensured Anne's position remained secure, even during periods when other royal mistresses rose and fell in favor. Anne Fitzroy, Countess of Sussex, lived until 1722, surviving well into the Hanoverian period and witnessing the dramatic political changes that followed the Glorious Revolution. Her descendants through the Leonard family continued to hold prominent positions in English society, carrying forward her royal heritage into the 18th century and beyond. Charles Fitzroy was born on 18 June 1662, another son of Charles II and Barbara Palmer, Countess of Castlemaine. His birth came at the height of his mother's influence at court, when she was universally recognized as the king's primary mistress and wielded considerable political power. As the eldest son among Barbara Palmer's children, Charles was destined for particular favor and would eventually inherit the highest title granted to any of her offspring. The timing of his birth, during the early years of Charles II's reign, positioned him to benefit fully from his father's growing power and his mother's sustained influence. Charles Fitzroy's upbringing reflected his position as the son of the king's most powerful mistress. He received an education befitting a future duke, with emphasis on classical learning, modern languages, and the skills necessary for court life and public service. Barbara Palmer ensured her children lived in magnificent style, and Charles grew up surrounded by luxury and privilege. His childhood included regular contact with his father, who showed consistent favor to Barbara Palmer's offspring. The young Charles was groomed for a life of prominence, with his mother's ambition ensuring he would be positioned to claim the highest honors available to royal bastards. Charles Fitzroy's adult career was marked by the accumulation of court offices and honors, rather than military distinction or political achievement. Following his mother's elevation to Duchess of Cleveland in 1670, he was styled Earl of Southampton and later succeeded to the Dukedom of Cleveland upon her death. He held various court appointments and received substantial grants from the crown, maintaining the lifestyle appropriate to his elevated rank. Unlike some of his half-brothers who distinguished themselves in military service, Charles Fitzroy's path lay in the management of his estates and the fulfillment of ceremonial duties associated with his ducal title. Charles Fitzroy married twice, both unions reflecting his elevated status as a duke and acknowledged royal son. His first marriage was to Mary Wood, which produced children who would continue the Cleveland line. Following Mary's death, he married Anne Pulteney, further cementing his position within the established aristocracy. Through these marriages and his resulting offspring, Charles ensured the continuation of the Dukedom of Cleveland and the perpetuation of his royal bloodline within the English nobility. His children and their descendants would maintain prominent positions in society well into the modern era. Charles II's relationship with this son was shaped largely by his enduring connection to Barbara Palmer. Even after their romantic relationship ended, the king continued to show favor to her children, and Charles Fitzroy benefited throughout his father's reign from royal generosity and advancement. His inheritance of the Cleveland dukedom represented the culmination of his mother's ambitions and his father's recognition. Charles Fitzroy, 2nd Duke of Cleveland, lived until 1730, surviving well into the Georgian era. Today, the Dukedom of Cleveland continues through his descendants, representing one of the most successful and enduring legacies among Charles II's illegitimate children. Henry Fitzroy was born on 28 September 1663, the son of Charles II and Barbara Palmer, Countess of Castlemaine. As another child of the king's most influential mistress, Henry was born into a position of considerable privilege and expectation. His birth occurred during the peak years of his mother's dominance at court, ensuring that he would receive the full benefits of royal acknowledgement and advancement. The Fitzroy name clearly proclaimed his royal heritage, while his mother's continued influence guaranteed substantial provision for his future. Henry Fitzroy's childhood was spent in the rarefied atmosphere of the Restoration Court, where Barbara Palmer's children lived in unprecedented luxury. His education emphasized military skills and leadership, reflecting his father's intention to employ him in military service. Unlike his elder brother Charles, who was destined for court life, Henry showed early aptitude for martial pursuits. He received training in horsemanship, swordplay, and military tactics, preparing him for the active military career that would define his adult life. His upbringing included regular interaction with professional soldiers and military advisors who shaped his understanding of warfare and command. Charles II created Henry, Duke of Grafton, in 1675, recognizing both his royal parentage and his military potential. Henry proved himself an exceptionally capable soldier, serving with distinction in various campaigns and quickly establishing a reputation for courage and tactical skill. His military abilities were put to their greatest test during the War of the League of Augsburg, when he served under King William III in the Irish campaigns against the forces of James II. At the Siege of Cork in 1690, the Duke of Grafton demonstrated the qualities that had made him one of the most promising military commanders of his generation. However, his promising career was cut tragically short when he was killed during the siege at the age of 27. His death represented a significant loss to the English military establishment and to the broader Fitzroy family. Henry Fitzroy married Isabella Bennet, daughter of the Earl of Arlington, a union that combined royal blood with established noble lineage. The marriage produced children who would continue the Grafton line and ensure the perpetuation of Henry's memory and bloodline. Despite his early death, his descendants would go on to play prominent roles in English society, maintaining the ducal title and the family's position among the premier nobility of the realm. Charles II clearly recognized Henry's exceptional abilities, as evidenced by his elevation to a dukedom and his prominent military appointments. The king took particular pride in Henry's military achievements, seeing in him the ideal combination of royal blood and proven capability. Henry Fitzroy represented everything Charles II hoped for in his illegitimate sons: acknowledgement of royal parentage combined with genuine merit and service to the crown. Today, the Dukes of Grafton trace their lineage directly back to Henry Fitzroy, maintaining one of the most distinguished and continuous aristocratic lines descended from Charles II. Charlotte Fitzroy was born in 1664, the daughter of Charles II and Barbara Palmer, Countess of Castlemaine. As the youngest daughter among Barbara Palmer's children, Charlotte was born into a well-established pattern of royal favor and acknowledgement. Her birth came during the later years of her mother's romantic relationship with the king, when the arrangements for supporting and advancing their children had become routine. The Fitzroy surname ensured her recognition as a royal daughter, while her mother's continued influence guaranteed appropriate provision for her future. Charlotte Fitzroy's upbringing followed the pattern established for her older siblings, with emphasis on the accomplishments expected of an aristocratic woman of the highest rank. She received instruction in languages, music, dancing, and the social graces necessary for court life. Her childhood was spent between her mother's magnificent residences and the royal court, where she had regular access to her father and developed relationships with her numerous half-siblings. Barbara Palmer's experience in raising royal children ensured Charlotte received excellent preparation for marriage into the nobility. Charlotte married at a remarkably young age, even by the standards of the 17th century, when she wed Edward Henry Lee, Earl of Lichfield, in 1677 at the age of 13. This early marriage reflected both her elevated status and the desire to secure advantageous alliances for royal daughters. Despite her youth at marriage, Charlotte proved remarkably fertile and successful as a mother, bearing numerous children who would ensure the continuation of the Lichfield line and the perpetuation of her royal heritage. The marriage proved both prolific and enduring, with Charlotte bearing many children over the course of her reproductive years. Her success as a mother was particularly notable even in an era when large families were common among the aristocracy. Through her numerous offspring, she ensured that her royal bloodline would be widely distributed among the English nobility. Charlotte Fitzroy's large family represented one of the most successful expansions of Charles II's bloodline into the established aristocracy. Her children married into prominent noble families throughout England, creating an extensive network of connections that enhanced the Lichfield family's influence and perpetuated royal descent through multiple lines. The prolific nature of her family ensured that her legacy would extend far beyond her own lifetime, with her descendants continuing to play prominent roles in English society for generations. Charles II maintained a warm relationship with Charlotte throughout his life, treating her with the consistent favor he showed to all of Barbara Palmer's children. Her successful marriage and large family undoubtedly pleased the king, who took satisfaction in seeing his children well established in aristocratic society. Charlotte Fitzroy, Countess of Lichfield, lived until 1718, surviving well into the Hanoverian era and witnessing the political transformations that followed the Glorious Revolution. Her numerous descendants continue to carry forward her royal heritage, making her one of the most successful of Charles II's daughters in terms of lasting dynastic impact. George Fitzroy was born on 28 December 1665, the son of Charles II and Barbara Palmer, Countess of Castlemaine. As the youngest son among Barbara Palmer's children, George was born during the final phase of his mother's romantic relationship with the king, when the patterns of royal favor and provision for their offspring were well established. His birth came at a time when Barbara Palmer's influence at court was beginning to wane, but her children's positions remained secure due to their acknowledged royal parentage and their father's consistent support. George Fitzroy's childhood followed the luxurious pattern established for his older siblings, with the finest education and preparation for a life of noble service. His upbringing emphasized both military training and the skills necessary for court life and estate management. As the youngest son, he received particular attention from his mother, who was experienced in advancing the careers of royal children. His education included classical learning, modern languages, and practical training in the management of large estates and military commands. Charles II created George, Duke of Northumberland in 1683, recognizing his royal parentage with one of the highest titles in the realm. George's adult career combined military service with administrative responsibilities, following the pattern expected of ducal families. He served in various military capacities and held court appointments that reflected his elevated rank and royal connections. His career was characterized by steady advancement and the accumulation of honors appropriate to his status as an acknowledged royal son. Unlike some of his brothers who died young in military service, George lived to enjoy the full fruits of his noble position. He managed extensive estates, participated in court life, and fulfilled the ceremonial and practical duties associated with his ducal rank. His career represented the successful culmination of royal bastard advancement, achieving the highest honors available to illegitimate children. George Fitzroy married Catherine Wheatley, later created Baroness Ogle, a union that brought together royal blood and established noble lineage. The marriage produced children who continued the Northumberland line and ensured the perpetuation of George's royal heritage within the English aristocracy. Through his descendants, the ducal title and its associated honors would continue to play a role in English noble society, representing one of the successful dynasties founded by Charles II's illegitimate children. Charles II's relationship with George reflected the king's consistent pattern of favor toward Barbara Palmer's children. Even as his romantic relationship with their mother ended, Charles continued to advance and support their careers. George's elevation to the dukedom of Northumberland represented the culmination of this royal favor and demonstrated the king's commitment to ensuring his illegitimate children achieved appropriate stations in life. George Fitzroy, 1st Duke of Northumberland, lived until 1716, surviving well into the Hanoverian period. His legacy continues through the ducal title and his descendants, representing one of the enduring aristocratic lines founded by Charles II's acknowledged children. Charles Beauclerk was born on 8 May 1670, the son of Charles II and Nell Gwynn, the famous actress who became one of the king's most beloved mistresses. His birth represented the offspring of perhaps the most popular and endearing of all Charles II's relationships, with Nell Gwyn's wit, charm, and obvious affection for the king making her a favorite not only at court but among the general public. The Beauclerk surname, meaning fair scholar, was specifically chosen to reflect his distinguished parentage while acknowledging his illegitimate status. Charles Beauclerk's childhood was shaped by his mother's unique position as both royal mistress and popular entertainer. Nell Gwyn's background as a commoner who rose through talent and personality gave her children a somewhat different upbringing than those of aristocratic mistresses. Nevertheless, Charles received an excellent education befitting his royal parentage, with particular emphasis on classical learning and the arts. His mother's intelligence and wit undoubtedly influenced his development, while his father's clear affection for Nell Gwyn ensured consistent royal favor and support. Charles II created his son Earl of Burford in 1676 and later Duke of St. Albans in 1684, reflecting both royal favor and recognition of the young man's potential. Charles Beauclerk's career combined court service with military duties, though he proved more successful in administrative and ceremonial roles than in active combat. He held various court appointments and managed extensive estates granted by his father. His elevation to a dukedom represented one of the highest honors Charles II could bestow upon his illegitimate children, reflecting both paternal affection and confidence in his son's abilities. Unlike some of his half-brothers who died young in military service, Charles Beauclerk lived to enjoy a long and successful career in noble society. His ducal title came with substantial estates and income, allowing him to maintain the lifestyle appropriate to his elevated rank while contributing to court life and public service. Charles Beauclerk married Diana de Vere, daughter of the Earl of Oxford, a union that combined royal blood with one of England's most ancient and distinguished noble lineages. The de Vere family could trace their ancestry back to the Norman conquest, making this marriage particularly prestigious. The union produced children who continued both the St. Albans ducal line and the ancient de Vere heritage, ensuring that Charles's royal bloodline would be perpetuated within the highest ranks of the English aristocracy. Charles II's relationship with this son was characterized by genuine warmth and affection, reflecting his enduring love for Nell Gwyn. The king clearly delighted in Nell's wit and personality, and these feelings extended to their children. Charles Beauclerk represented the offspring of the king's most emotionally satisfying relationship, and royal favor reflected this special connection. Charles Beauclerk, 1st Duke of St. Albans, lived until 1726, surviving well into the Georgian era. Today, the Dukes of St. Albans continue to trace their lineage directly back to this son of Charles II and Nell Gwyn, representing one of the most enduring and distinguished dynasties founded by the king's illegitimate children. James Beauclerk was born in 1671, the younger son of Charles II and Nell Gwyn. His birth came just 1 year after his elder brother Charles, during the height of his mother's favor with the king. As the second son of the beloved actress, James was born into a position of acknowledged royal favor, though his life would prove tragically brief. The Beauclerk surname connected him to his brother and proclaimed their shared royal heritage through their popular and charismatic mother. James Beauclerk's short life was spent in the warmth and affection of Nell Gwyn's household, where royal favor ensured luxury and attention despite his illegitimate status. His mother's genuine love for Charles II and the king's obvious reciprocal affection created a family environment marked by security and happiness. James received the education appropriate to a royal son, though his extreme youth limited the scope of his formal instruction. His early years were characterized by his mother's devotion and his father's consistent interest in his development. Tragically, James Beauclerk died in 1680 or 1681 at approximately 9 or 10 years of age. His death represented a significant loss to both his parents, cutting short what promised to be another successful royal bastard's career. The cause of his death remains unclear in historical records, but child mortality was common in the 17th century even among the privileged classes. His early death meant that he never had the opportunity to receive the titles and advancement that would likely have been granted to him as he matured. Despite his brief life, James Beauclerk was fully acknowledged by Charles II as his son, receiving the same recognition accorded to all of Nell Gwyn's children. His relationship with his parents was characterized by warmth and affection, reflecting the genuine emotional connection between Charles II and Nell Gwyn. The young James had no opportunity to marry or have children of his own. and his death meant that this particular line of royal descent ended with him. Charles II's grief at James's death reflected both paternal affection and his particular fondness for Nell Gwyn's children. The king had clearly intended to provide for James's advancement as he had for his other acknowledged sons, and the boy's early death represented an opportunity lost rather than any lack of royal favor. James Beauclerk's brief life serves as a reminder of the vulnerability of even royal children to the diseases and accidents that claimed so many young lives in the 17th century. Though his life was short, he was fully acknowledged as Charles II's son, and mourned as such by both his parents. Charles Lennox was born on 29 July 1672, the son of Charles II and Louise de Keroualle, Duchess of Portsmouth. His birth represented the offspring of the king's last great romantic attachment, with Louise de Keroualle being a French aristocrat who had been sent to the English court partly to influence Charles II's foreign policy in France's favor. As the son of a duchess in her own right and a sophisticated European noblewoman, Charles Lennox was born into particular privilege and would benefit from his mother's intelligence, ambition, and continental connections. Charles Lennox's upbringing reflected both his royal parentage and his mother's French aristocratic background. Louise de Keroualle ensured her son received an education that combined English noble traditions with French cultural refinement. His childhood was spent between the English court and his mother's French connections, giving him a cosmopolitan outlook unusual even among royal children. The Duchess of Portsmouth's influence at court remained strong throughout Charles II's later years, ensuring her son's position was secure and his advancement assured. Charles II created his son Duke of Richmond and Lennox in 1675, granting him one of the most prestigious titles in the realm, along with substantial estates in England and Scotland. Charles Lennox's career combined court service with the management of his extensive ducal properties. He proved an able administrator of his estates and fulfilled the ceremonial and practical duties associated with his elevated rank. His position as the son of the king's final great love ensured continued royal favor and substantial provision for his advancement. Unlike some of his half-brothers who pursued primarily military careers, Charles Lennox focused on estate management, court life, and the diplomatic connections that his mother's French background made possible. His career was characterized by steady advancement and the accumulation of honors appropriate to his status as one of Charles II's most favored illegitimate sons. Charles Lennox married Anne Brudenell, daughter of the Earl of Cardigan, a union that combined royal blood with established English nobility. The marriage proved successful both personally and dynastically, producing children who would continue the Richmond and Lennox ducal lines. Through his descendants, Charles ensured that his royal heritage would be perpetuated within the highest ranks of both English and Scottish aristocracy, as his titles carried significant influence in both kingdoms. Charles II's relationship with Charles Lennox was characterized by particular warmth and favor, reflecting his enduring affection for Louise de Keroualle. The king clearly intended this son to be among the most prominent of his illegitimate children, as evidenced by his elevation to the highest ducal rank and the substantial provision made for his future. Charles Lennox, 1st Duke of Richmond and Lennox, lived until 1723, surviving well into the Georgian period. Today, the Dukes of Richmond continue to trace their lineage directly back to this son of Charles II, representing one of the most successful and enduring aristocratic dynasties founded by the king's illegitimate children. His descendants have played prominent roles in English and Scottish society for over 3 centuries. Lady Mary Tudor was born in 1673, the daughter of Charles II and Moll Davis, an actress and singer who briefly captured the king's attention at court. Her birth came during the later years of Charles II's reign, when the patterns of acknowledging and providing for illegitimate children were well established. The Tudor surname was specifically chosen to reflect her royal heritage, connecting her to England's most famous royal dynasty while acknowledging her illegitimate status. As the daughter of a performer, Mary's background differed from those of Charles II's children born to aristocratic mistresses. Mary Tudor's childhood was shaped by her mother's brief but intense relationship with the king and the subsequent need to secure the child's position and future. Though Moll Davis did not achieve the lasting influence of mistresses like Barbara Palmer or Nell Gwyn, she ensured her daughter received appropriate education and preparation for noble life. Mary's upbringing emphasized the accomplishments expected of an aristocratic woman, with particular attention to music and the arts, reflecting her mother's theatrical background. Mary Tudor's adult life was characterized by her successful integration into aristocratic society despite her mother's humble origins. Her royal parentage opened doors throughout English noble circles, and she moved comfortably among the great families of the realm. Though she did not receive the extensive grants and titles given to children of more influential mistresses, her acknowledged royal blood ensured her a respectable position in society and suitable marriage prospects. Mary Tudor married Edward Radcliffe, 2nd Earl of Derwentwater, a union that brought together royal blood and ancient English nobility. The marriage proved significant both personally and politically, as the Radcliffe family held extensive estates in northern England and maintained important connections in both English and Scottish society. Through this marriage, Mary gained the title Countess of Derwentwater and became connected to one of England's most distinguished Catholic noble families. The marriage produced children who continued both the Radcliffe line and Mary's royal heritage. However, the family's Catholic faith and later Jacobite sympathies would bring both distinction and danger to her descendants in the turbulent politics of the early 18th century. Charles II's relationship with Mary Tudor reflected his general pattern of acknowledging and providing for his illegitimate children, though her mother's brief tenure as royal mistress meant Mary did not receive the extensive advancement given to children of more lasting relationships. Nevertheless, the king ensured she was well married and established in aristocratic society. Lady Mary Tudor, Countess of Derwentwater, lived until 1726, surviving well into the Hanoverian era. Her legacy continues through her descendants, though the family's later Jacobite connections would bring both honor and tragedy to the Radcliffe line in subsequent generations. The story of Charles II's children reveals a fascinating pattern of royal favor, noble advancement, and dynastic success that shaped English aristocratic society for centuries to come. Despite fathering at least 14 acknowledged children by 7 different mistresses, the Merry Monarch died without a single legitimate heir, leaving his throne to his Catholic brother James II and setting in motion the political crisis that would culminate in the Glorious Revolution. Yet Charles II's biological legacy proved remarkably enduring through his illegitimate offspring. Of his children who survived to adulthood, most achieved significant noble titles, with several founding ducal houses that continue to this day. The Dukes of Richmond, Grafton, and St. Albans trace their lineages directly back to Charles II's sons, while the Dukes of Cleveland and numerous other noble families carry forward his bloodline through both male and female descendants. The divergent fortunes of these children illustrate the complex factors that determine success in Restoration society. James Scott, Duke of Monmouth, despite being the eldest and most favored, died on the scaffold for his rebellion against royal authority. Henry Fitzroy, Duke of Grafton, fell in military service to the crown, while Charles FitzCharles, Earl of Plymouth, died young in the challenging garrison of Tangier. Yet others, like Charles Beauclerk, Duke of St. Albans, and Charles Lennox, Duke of Richmond, lived long lives and founded lasting dynasties. The influence of their mothers proved crucial in determining their ultimate success. Children of Barbara Palmer and Louise de Querouaille, both powerful and long-lasting royal mistresses, generally achieved the highest titles and most extensive provision. Nell Gwyn's warmth and popularity ensured her sons received significant advancement, while children of briefer relationships, though acknowledged, received more modest advancement. Today, hundreds of noble families throughout Britain and beyond can trace their ancestry back to Charles II through his illegitimate children. His biological legacy permeates the highest levels of English aristocratic society, creating an extensive network of royal descent that far exceeds what any legitimate dynastic succession might have achieved. Though he failed to secure the succession through lawful heirs, Charles II's genetic legacy became woven into the very fabric of British noble society, ensuring his bloodline would endure far longer than his Stuart dynasty's hold on the throne. In the end, Charles II's children represent both the opportunities and limitations of illegitimate royal birth in the 17th century. While they could achieve great titles and found lasting dynasties, they remained forever excluded from the throne itself. Their stories illuminate the complex world of Restoration politics, the power of royal favor, and the enduring importance of noble bloodlines in shaping English society for generations to come.